right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Anya Allenbacher, and I'm the Active Transportation Program Manager at the CTC. Um, this is our fourth central workshop for the 2027 Active Transportation Program. And we will get started. So I'm going to hand it over to Jaden for some logistics.
Thank you, Anya, and good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to our fourth Cycle 8 ATP Central Workshop. The CTC exists to make transportation planning, funding, and policy more understandable and accountable. Our workshops can take place in diverse locations around the state so that commissioners and staff can hear directly from our stakeholders around California. The workshop agenda is located on our website at www.catc.ca.gov. Live closed captioning is available on this webinar. Please select the Show Captions tab at the bottom of your screen. There are a number of language options available there to choose from. Any document the CTC creates can be translated into any language you need. Simply email us at ctc@catc.ca.gov and we'll have them returned to you as quickly as possible. For all of our workshops, we encourage interaction with our stakeholders. There will be opportunity for questions and comments throughout this workshop. We will stop periodically throughout this workshop to address stakeholder questions. You should see the webinar control panel, likely located on the bottom of your screen. There you will find the raised hand and Q&A tabs. We encourage you to use the raise hand feature as soon as we reach the item to give the system time to acknowledge you. Commission staff will let you know when it is your turn to make your comment. Once you have been unmuted, please make sure to state your name and your agency. Alternatively, you may use the Q&A tab to submit your comment or question. Commission staff will read that on your behalf. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link or phone number to access the webinar. These should not be shared with other participants, as this can create confusion for staff when making comments. Please do your best to be concise. Please make sure that your comments add new information. If you agree with the comments of a previous speaker, simply make that statement. And if you face any technical issues, please reach out through the chat or Q&A tab, and I will do my best to assist you. So thank you all for joining us today. I just wanted to go over additionally some workshop principles. So please be respectful of other viewpoints. Please keep a statewide perspective. Remember that this program serves a large variety of applicants. And please propose your ideas in public settings so we can discuss that as a group. Thank you all, and I will turn it over to Anya to go over our agenda.
Thank you, Jaden. Okay, so today's agenda, we will have a brief active transportation program overview for those of you who are new to the program. And then Jaden will do a recap of what we covered and what we reached consensus on at our last workshop, which was on September 17th. And then I will turn it over to our Caltrans colleagues, Emma Maloney, to do a workshop on the non-infrastructure guidance document. And then if we have time after that, we will continue with our clarify and reduce redundancies in the guidelines updates. And then we'll cover action items. For those of you who had a chance to peek at the agenda we posted online, you may have seen that we had planned to go over the new section that we're proposing in the guidelines for the MPO component. However, we're still working through a few items with our MPO partners, and so we'll bring that section to the larger stakeholder group at a future workshop. All right, next slide. All right, Alika, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so before we jump into the topics for today's workshop, we wanted to provide just a high-level overview of the program. So the Active Transportation Program funds projects that encourage increased use of active modes of transportation. That includes walking and biking. In terms of our funding, this is a reimbursement program. We utilize both federal and state funds. And for, excuse me, for the 2027 ATP or cycle 8, we are anticipating approximately $550 million across 4 years. And the fiscal years for this upcoming cycle includes fiscal years 2027-28, 2028-29, 2029-30, and 2030-31. In terms of eligible applicants, you'll see we have a long list of eligible applicants. So we have local, regional, state agencies, Caltrans, transit agencies, natural resources or public land agencies, public schools or school districts, tribal governments, private nonprofit or tax-exempt organizations, as well as any other entity with transportation oversight that has been approved by commission. In terms of the funding distribution, you'll see it's broken out across 3 components. So 50% of the funds go to the statewide component. Any project that is not selected for funding in the statewide component then has a second round shot, either in the small urban and rural component, or if you fall within one of the 10 large metropolitan planning organizations, you have a second shot under that component. So 10% of those funds, 10% of the funds go to small urban and rural, and 40% of the remaining funds go to the metropolitan planning organization component. In terms of eligible projects, you'll see a variety of types of projects that we fund in this program. So we fund the traditional infrastructure projects. So these are capital projects that further the goals of the program. We also do non-infrastructure projects. So these are education and encouragement programs. We also fund plans. So these are development of community-wide bicycle, pedestrian, safe routes to school, or active transportation plans, and they must encompass a disadvantaged community. And then we also offer combination applications, which include infrastructure improvements alongside non-infrastructure elements. So these are, again, capital projects with education or encouragement components. I see we have a question in the chat asking, on eligible applicants, should there be a reminder that applicants must have a master agreement with Caltrans? Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Greg. That is included in our guidelines. And I know it's something that we kind of talk through this guideline process, but yes, thank you for bringing that up. Okay, just making sure there aren't any other questions or hands raised. Okay, next slide, please, Jaden. Thank you. And this is just a high-level overview of the program across the past 7 cycles. So we have a little over 1,200 projects programmed currently. That totals to about $3.9 billion in ATP funds. And we'll, let's see, so we have $1.9 billion allocated as of fiscal year 24-25, which is great. And in terms of total project costs, those are valued at over $7.4 billion across the 7 cycles. I see we have a question from Judy Weber asking if we can send out the draft 2027 ATP fund estimate. Thank you for your question, Judy. We have not received the draft fund estimate at this point. That will come forward alongside the draft guidelines at the January 2026 commission meeting. So we'll be sure to notify all of our stakeholders and to share that with you all. Okay, next slide, please. I can also cover this slide unless Jaden, did you want to touch on engagement?
Okay, so just going to briefly touch on the Cycle 8 engagement. So we have our central workshops, which you're currently in attendance on. This is our 4th one. Our next one will be October 16th, which will be at the Merced CTC meeting. That will be a hybrid workshop. And something to note is that the past central workshops have been via Zoom. Our next one on October 16th will be handled on Teams. So there's a new registration link that will be attached to this presentation, as well as online on our CTC website. So definitely be on the lookout for that. I will also send a reminder with the new registration link for that October 16th workshop. Next, we have our branch workshop. So we have been getting people signing up for that. Thank you very much. The link again will be attached in this presentation, as well as on our website. Branch workshops, the registration period closes October 31st. So make sure to get your request in and we'll start coordinating those once the registration period closes. Additionally, we do have site visits and you can sign up for those as well. Again, link in the presentation and on our website. And our virtual site visits are opportunities to discuss potential Cycle 8 projects with CTC staff so we can get you some feedback there and make sure we're putting that best application forward. And then lastly, we do have application debriefs and again, virtual. So this is an opportunity to go over past submitted ATP applications, whether that's from cycle 5, 6, 7, and we can go over those with you to kind of show you where things went right, where things went wrong, and provide some additional feedback. I will go to the next slide to discuss our recap from the September 17th workshop. Okay, so before I start, I just wanted to mention that the materials from our last workshop are available on our CTC website, so you can find a recording of the workshop as well as the presentation. But to provide a high-level recap of what we went over, we clarified our guideline language, particularly in part 2, 7, and 8, discussing the various subsections within those. So in part 2, we discussed leveraging of funds. In part 7, we discussed the contingency list. And in part 8, we discussed the letter of no prejudice, project cost savings, project cancellation, as well as audits. Next, we discussed the deleted guidelines sections, which was part 10 in the 2025 guidelines, which discusses the roles and responsibilities. And one thing to mention is some of the information pertaining the MPO region is now moved to a new section for the MPOs. So you can find a lot of that information within that new section. And then lastly, we discussed the Quick Build pilot program. So the Quick Build projects will remain eligible only in the MPO component and no longer eligible in the small urban and rural, as well as the statewide component. So that is a high-level summary of what we went over in our last workshop. Again, the materials can be found on our website. So go there and you can access our agenda, the presentation, as well as the recording of the workshop. Okay. Next, I believe I will turn it over to Emma, who is here to discuss the ATP non-infrastructure guidance. All right, thank you,
Thanks,
Emma. I'll turn it over
Jaden.
to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy October 1st. My name is Emma Malinay. I'm the Non-Infrastructure and Plans Acting Program Manager. I have my contact info at the end of the slide deck. Today, I'm going to give an overview of the current NI guidance and allow for a workshop-style discussion at the end of the overview for any proposed changes or recommendations to the Cycle 8 NI guidelines update that we are currently working on. Next slide, please. So the workshop agenda is as follows. I'll provide an overview of the current NI guidance layout, definitions, expenses, etc., and briefly go over some of the proposed change examples with time provided at the end for discussion around changes that you all would like to see within the NI guidance, and then go over some next steps. And I will take questions during the discussion period slide as to get through the overview. Next slide, please. So the guidance was updated, last updated March of 2022 during cycle 6. And I wanted to give you like the why, what, how of the guidance. So the NI program supports education and encouragement activities that further the ATP program's purpose and goals. And the NI guidance exists as a complementary document to our ATP guidelines for projects with an NI component to aid in the understanding of eligible expenditures. And it should be used during the scoping process for the ATP NI components. The The NI guidelines were developed utilizing federal and state guidance from which we receive funding. So that helped us shape these guidelines to determine what was eligible and eligible and non-eligible expenditures under the ATP. I linked the guidance below, and it can also be found on the CTC and Caltrans ATP internet pages. Next slide, please. So section 1, guidance overview, overarching procedures for non-infrastructure projects. Sustainability, the project should demonstrate how the project will be sustained post-completion of the ATP work plan, and the ATP cannot fund existing or ongoing program operations. For public entity partners, an interagency agreement or memorandum of understanding with a public entity partner can be achieved without a competitive hiring process with the awarding agency. So that would be like a public health department or school district, etc. Consultants are, educational and outreach consultants, training instructors, and they are considered non-architecture and engineering, so that's non-A&E services, and a competitive process such as a RFQ, RFP must be utilized to procure the consultants. For donated, in-kind, or other funding for services / items, these items cost do not count towards the limitations within the guidance. However, they must be included within the 25R work plan that's submitted. For pre-approval / item eligibility request process, some of the items not mentioned within the guidance may be eligible and are subject to be approved by on a case-by-case basis. So you would want to send the request to the ATP NI program manager. And we do have an ATP NI inbox, which again, I have all the contact information at the end of my slides. So you would want to reach out to the ATP NI program manager with your ATP coordinator copied to request eligibility on items that you don't see listed within the guidance. Next slide, please. So post-award period. Once awarded and ready to go in for allocation at the CTC meeting, the ATP awardee will submit the 25R work plan, which you would have already included in your application, to the NI. So that'll be submitted to the ATP NI manager for approval prior to allocation. And during the review, we just ensure that the 25R submitted matches what was originally awarded, as to not skew from the original awarded application content, and to ensure that all items meet eligibility and expenditure requirements here in the ATP NI guidelines. So post allocation, if changes need to be made to cost or items within your 25R work plan, replaced, you would again reach out to the ATP NI program manager. And we have this lovely ATP NI inbox here at the bottom. So you just reach out to that ATP NI inbox, and we would review that for what would be either a minor scope modification, and if it was something larger, then we'd have to take it to CTC for approval. And then some kind of examples of making changes to your 25R cost items would be like shifting funds between tasks, or let's say you have like X amount of adult helmets and you need to substitute some for children's helmets within your work plan. Those would be some of these like minor scope modifications within your 25R that would be acceptable. And again, all 25R requests prior to or post allocation will be sent to the ATP NI inbox with your district ATP coordinator copied. And you can also send questions to this inbox. And again, I'll have all this contact information at the end of the slideshow. Next slide, please. So section 2, detailed guidance overview, items and cost. These are the parameters for eligible NI expenses, and there's more detail on these within the guidance and I'll go over some examples in the next slides of eligible costs under these categories. So staff costs, things like salaries and benefits for agencies, cost of a consultant to support the project, training, equipment. So this would be for training and educational purposes only, not to be given away. So that's like, bicycle inventories for maybe bicycle rodeos, things like that. Travel, so travel costs, mileage, and only necessary travel for staff and volunteers. Supply materials, so education and educational encouragement materials specific to the project. Transit related items are allowed if linked to first last mile connections and basic office and field supplies. Incentives, so ped and bike related educational safety and health items used to encourage participation in the program, and we have two categories for that. So we have minor incentives and major incentives like helmets and bike lights and things like that, and like minor ones like stickers or little more smaller items. Indirect costs. So an agency must have an approved indirect cost allocation plan or an ICAP or an indirect cost rate proposal, ICRP agreement with Caltrans in order to be reimbursed for indirect cost. And other direct costs, which must be directly related to the implementation of the ATP NI program. All right. Next slide, please. So these are some of the expense categories and eligible expenses that you might find under some of the categories. These aren't all the eligible expenses. There's just some general examples that we see a lot. And again, purchase of items not mentioned within the guidelines may be eligible and are, to be approved by Caltrans on a case-by-case basis. So that's something you would want to reach out to that ATP NI inbox for. And that's something that the ATP program manager would look at for approval. So we have things under staff costs like, consultants, childcare, crossing guard trainings. And then for trainings, we have, bike and ped instructors, train the trainer. We also have under equipment, some of the larger items we see are like bicycles, helmets, safety gear, ped and bike training equipment like repair tools, repair stands, bike pumps, chalk. And then we have supplies and materials, so flyers, maps, office supplies like clipboards, pens. Then we have incentives, and again, we have two categories under here, which are minor and major. As far as major incentives go, we have helmets, locks, lights. For some of the more minor ones, we have like reflective gear or healthy snacks. And there are cost caps on these, which can be found in the NI guidance. Some of the other direct costs are media campaigns, web hosting, postage, working meeting mills. And again, these aren't all of the costs, they're just some examples. Next slide, please. So for ineligible expenses, these are the current listed ineligible expenses under the NI guidelines, and we can discuss these more during the discussion period if you have any questions or on these. And so paid volunteers, we cannot pay our volunteers, crossing guard salaries, which is one thing I will say that is actually eligible under federal funding now. Conference attendance, out-of-state travel for training, no attendance at a conference, equipment, computers, laptops, cell phones. So supplies and materials, supplies that are not related to the NI program. So, just like buying reams of paper for a classroom, things like that. Incentives, bicycles cannot be given away under the program. T-shirts can't be given away as incentives. You can have staff T-shirts, but not T-shirts as an incentive giveaway. Transit passes, participation meals, gift cards, cash, etc. Other direct costs like permanent infrastructure, bike racks, because then we're going into our more infrastructure related side of projects. And Next slide. So these are some examples of the proposed changes that we're looking at, and most of them are cost increases, due to cost hikes for just about everything. So we've been looking at some cost increases on some of these items because, again, like I said at the beginning, this NI guidance hasn't been updated since March of 2022. So crossing guard salaries are now eligible under federal guidance. Traffic control staff, adding as an example under staff time for things like closed street projects, which are eligible under the NI program. As far as equipment goes, bicycles, we're looking to possibly increase the cap on those. It's currently set at $350 per bike. Helmets are listed under equipment and incentives currently at $30 for a children's helmet, $35 per adult helmet. We're looking to possibly increase that. Again, looking for some feedback from the group on costs that you may have encountered if you've had an NI program or looked into one. Bicycle locks are currently at $15. And then the other one would be increasing the meals during staff working meetings to match the state reimbursement rates. So these are just some examples that we've been looking at. And again, we can talk about these during the discussion period. Next slide, please. So these are some of the appendices that we have right now. As far as like, supplemental guidance, recommended procedures, best practices, and some references. And again, if you have any recommendations on things that you'd like to see, or maybe that you need some clarity around, we'd greatly appreciate you bringing that up during the discussion period. But just wanted to note these here. These are just a few of them that we have listed within our NI guidance currently. And next slide, please. So I'll open it up for discussion right now. Take any questions if you have any.
I'll give it another few seconds here to see if anything comes in.
Okay. And then I do have like some possible discussion topics, like as far as like our cost cap still reasonable given the current pricing. Would you like to see any more appendices added? Should any sections receive clarity within the guidance? Are there any costs that frequently come up that are not listed, et cetera, things like that. I will say that if you can't think of anything right now, I also created a Smartsheet form for feedback on the NI guidelines. So if you need time to look at them, maybe you're not familiar with the guidelines. And again, this was a pretty brief overview of the guidelines. I tried to be as detailed as possible, but also we can share those guidelines with you, and I can share that NI feedback form at the end.
Yeah, not seeing any hands raised or questions come in.
Okay, perfect. We'll send out the form. So if anything comes up or you think of anything, please feel free to reach out. And next slide, please.
I'm sorry, Emma, we just got a question that came in.
Okay.
We have a question asking, would a community outreach and engagement program intended to support a future infrastructure plan be eligible?
So, as a ATP project type?
My assumption is yes.
Okay. I mean, I would think so. Sorry, can you say the question one more time? Let me look here. Would a community outreach engagement program intended to support
and we can also ask, I believe it's Brenna, to come off mute and maybe elaborate. Brenna, oh, there you go.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So this would be like a next step in a feasibility study to support a future infrastructure project, a bicycle project in particular. And so it would be an outreach program to engage with the community, figure out what, user groups and goals would be important to the community and how to specifically support expanding user groups for this bicycle trail, supporting mode shift for an impacted community.
I think I understand the question, Emma, if you want me to step in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Alidor Westbrook. I work with Emma at Caltrans as the Active Transportation Resource Center project manager. So it sounds like it's probably what you're proposing is something as part of the project development process for an infrastructure project. Is that correct, Brenna?
Yes, I would say so.
Okay, so that historically has not been funded through the NI component of the ATP. But yeah, so what we're more focused on, as Emma shared, like the education components, like putting together a Safe Routes to School program, hosting an Open Streets event, doing a demonstration project. So maybe like a demonstration project near where you have plans to do this eventual infrastructure project is more along the lines of the types of projects that we've funded in the past, but we don't fund phases of project delivery through NI.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. And I will note that we do have ATP NI office hours. So if you wanted to like workshop something there to possibly create an NI project, we can also talk about that there and we can share the link. And that usually goes out through the ATRC newsletter.
Yes, I'll drop both those links in the chat. Good.
Thank you. Thank you, Allie.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Anything else in the Q&A? Thanks, Brina. Okay. Again, if you
Hey,
can't
I
think
was
of anything.
muted. I didn't
okay.
realize. But no,
Okay,
there were
good.
no more questions or hands raised.
Thank you, Alika. We do have that form, so if you need to familiarize yourself with the guidelines, you can take a look. If you have questions, suggestions, comments, what have you, we have a nice form set up that you can fill out and submit those. And we just ask that that form's filled out by October 31st, which is on my next slide. So next slide, please. Perfect. So next steps. Again, the lovely form we created that you can fill out with feedback. We ask that you do have your feedback submitted by 10/31/2025. At that point in time, we'll review feedback and then finalize and update the ATP Cycle 8 NI guidance for this upcoming cycle that we're currently in. And next slide, please. So this is mine and Allie's contact information and the ATP-INI inbox email here. Just a heads up for people that I've worked with in the past, I'm going to be going on maternity leave starting October 16th. So for those of you who've reached out to me, I do have folks monitoring the ATP-INI inbox. And so if you have any questions, I'll have an out of office. Thank you, Rachel. I'll have an out of office message with all this information. So if you have any questions or anything, please feel free to reach out and someone from my team will respond.
Yeah. And I just want to emphasize, like, we really would love to hear from you all. You're the folks delivering NI projects. You have way more experience on how much, this work is actually costing and how much you're spending on incentives and other eligible items. So, yeah, we want to make sure that we've heard from as many people as possible when we're doing this update, because I think it will just, make our existing guidance stronger and also meet the needs of you all as ATP awardees. So I know it's a survey, but it's not super long.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate anytime you're able to providing feedback to us.
All right. Thank you, Emma and Ali. We really appreciate your presentation today. Any other remarks before we continue on with the slideshow? Okay, sounds good. Thank you both so much. And we'll keep it rolling. I believe this next section is Anya.
All right. So thank you, Ali and Emma, for your presentation. So we did have a few other sections planned to go over with you. If I want to just say, if anybody thinks of a question for Emma or Ali, you know, or has something, we can always jump back. I'm happy to do that. I think, you know, they're here for you to talk through anything you might want to. All right, so the next slides are again just presenting to you the proposed edits to the language of the guidelines. There aren't any policy changes that we're suggesting for these sections. There is some clarification of existing policy. Yeah, if there's yeah, so we'll talk through it, but just wanted to start off with that. All right, next slide. Okay, so this section talks about the program of projects. Basically, this section is after the section that talks about the project selection. So once the projects have gone through the review process and have been scored, then we talk about the program of projects. And so the updates here are just to clarify the language again, and it's pretty straightforward, I think, in terms of our process. We recommend the staff recommendations for a program of projects, of the projects that will be funded, are always developed consistent with our adopted fund estimate and all the statutory requirements. And there's no change to the timeline in terms of when our programs are adopted. And yeah, I'll pause there in terms of me talking and maybe pause for a second before we move on to the next slide. If you have questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hand. All right.
Not seeing any questions or hands raised.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay. So on this slide, there is some new text, which basically just outlines some processes that we currently do. For example, you see the second paragraph that was moved to this section relates to projects that are implemented by Caltrans, where those are the only projects where we program and allocate actually construction support and right-of-way support separately from the capital costs. And again, that's only for Caltrans implemented projects, and that is a long-standing process. I did want to point out too the last paragraph on the right-hand side of the slide kind of has like the pink highlight. That language, again, not changing any process or policies, but updating the language to kind of the current status. The we didn't think that there were any projects from previous cycles that did not meet the PSR equivalency requirements. So it was really just to change the language to update everyone on the requirement to have PSR equivalency before funds can be allocated. Next slide. Okay. If there are no questions on that, I will hand it over to Alika to talk about performance metrics requirements.
Thanks, Anya. I'm not seeing any other questions or hands raised, so I'll go ahead and jump in here. So the performance metrics section is specific to the project details requested by commission staff after your project has been programmed in the current cycle. So some of you may have gone through this process in previous cycles, but essentially commission staff will reach out to you with all of the details surrounding your project. And so this section of the guidelines has been updated just with minor text edits and clarifying language. So just to kind of go through, the agencies that don't provide the required metric data by the requested deadline may face disciplinary consequences, and you'll see this broken out. So it'll start off with a written warning, required appearance before the commission, and placement on a watch list. If there are metric data or any other sort of information for an awarded project that we were never provided, there are further consequences. So that includes ineligibility for future allocations and programming actions, as well as reduced reimbursements. So this language was added in the guidelines in cycle 6. And just to provide a little bit of history on this, for I believe 2 or 3 cycles now, commission staff has been developing and putting together a benefits report of all of the potential benefits of these proposed projects that are recommended for funding. And so through that process, we have utilized various tools to come up with these benefits that are provided. And so that information is something that we need from the implementing agencies so that we are showing true metrics of what these projects will be doing in the future. So Jaden, if you can please go to the next slide. Okay, so on this slide, this is section A of the performance metrics section. So this part is focused on the user counts. So these must be completed for each awarded infrastructure project. And the added language here provides further clarification on the user count requirements. And so you'll see there is some language that's crossed out. And there is some language that has been added. Again, this is to provide clarification and just to streamline the entire section here. Next slide, please. Okay, so looking at part B of this section, this is the other performance metrics section. This kind of ties back into the history I provided on the benefits report. So again, we are able to compile and put together this report by collecting data from all of you if your project is successful in the program. And so in the past, we've utilized 2 different tools to showcase these benefits. Initially, we started off utilizing the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Benefits Calculator tool. And the reason we utilized that tool was because the tool that the Active Transportation Resource Center and UC Davis have been working on to build out for the active transportation program was still in the early stages of development. And so we still wanted to be able to showcase and highlight all of the great benefits that the ATP provides throughout the state. And so we utilized the AHSC tool to showcase that. And so now that the tool is more established, we've done beta testing, and we're now in phase 2 of improving the tool. And after we actually utilized it in the 2023 benefits report, we are now happy to state that we will only be utilizing that moving forward, and we will no longer be utilizing AHSC. And so that's why on this section of the guidelines, you'll see that the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities section has been removed. And we've just clarified some language surrounding the California Active Transportation Benefit Cost Tool. Let's see if there's any questions coming in. Okay, we have one from Greg asking, will the Active Transportation Benefit Cost Tool be required to used in the application process? For Cycle 8, we are not anticipating requiring the use of it. However, if agencies would like to utilize it, that is totally fine. We've always left that option open. If you want to discuss some of the benefits within your application, that's acceptable, but it's not a requirement at this point. Any other questions? Okay. Anya, I think I'm handing things back over to you.
Yep. Thank you. Next slide, Jaden. Okay. So next we wanted to talk about the committed and uncommitted funds section. Most of the edits here are just to make the language included in the ATP guidelines consistent with what this section contains for other commission program guidelines. And for those of you who are not familiar with this section, so when you apply for your project in the active transportation program, if you're not if you have matching or leveraging, well, we don't require matching. So if you have local or federal funds that are on the project, which would count as leveraging funds, we ask that you differentiate between whether or not they're committed and uncommitted. So this section talks about the expectation for when you can call a fund source committed and when we determine that it's uncommitted. So next slide. This second part of the section has the most edits in terms of clarifying the language. The policy for when the commission will or may choose to program a project with uncommitted funds. The two situations where we do that has not changed. So the first is the project is at the funding cutoff in the MPO component for the MPO, and they have programmed up to the total funding apportioned in the fund estimate for their MPO region. That is one situation where we will program a project with uncommitted funds. And the second one is when the applicant is using the large infrastructure application type, and that is the only application type where we allow applicants to only apply for the funding of pre-construction. And so the later phases, including construction, can be programmed with uncommitted funds, and the applicant can choose to come forward in a later active transportation cycle to have those funded, or find the local or federal funds to move the project forward. So uncommitted funds can only be from a few sources. There's the competitive programs where we allow uncommitted funds to be identified, which is the Commission's Local Partnership Program, Solutions for Congested Corridors Program, and the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, or federal discretionary grants. And projects that want to show uncommitted funds in a future ATP cycle, that can only be for project phases that are not requesting funding in the current ATP applications. So, and that would apply to those with the large infrastructure application. You'll see there's a sentence in green outline, and I wanted to point this out to you to see if there's any feedback or concerns about this. So the Local Partnership Formulaic Program, as many of you know, is also one of the Commission's SB1 programs. However, it's not a competitive program, it's formulaic. So the new sentence here reads that Local Partnership Formulaic Program funds may be uncommitted if the funds are programmed to the project concurrent with the ATP Cycle 8 programming. So I'll pause there.
We have a
Yes.
couple hands raised. Aaron, go ahead.
Great, thank you. This is Aaron Hoyt from Nevada County Transportation Commission. Hi, Anya, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll have to first start off by apologizing. I wasn't at one of the prior workshops, and I was curious to know whether this topic was brought up and discussed during that session.
Topic, the committed and uncommitted funds?
Yes, and these changes.
No,
Okay.
this is the first workshop.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's a lot of other folks on here who are going to be a lot smarter and will understand the process for this. But if you wouldn't mind going back to slide 29. When we're talking about utilizing RSTP or CMAQ, it appears, as I was looking at it and as you were talking, that we'll need to have those monies actually programmed in the FTIP when we're submitting an ATP application. Is my understanding correct? Or is it just that if the project is awarded ATP funding, those funds will need to be programmed?
I think so. It's going to be the same as it is for any other commission program.
Okay.
I think that you're allowed to have them committed at the time of programming. So, or
Okay.
Lori, I saw you come off mute if you want to address
Yeah.
that. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
So Aaron, before they're in the FTIP, do they have to be voted by your board?
Yes, they
Okay.
would. before they get into the FTIP would need to be programmed by our governing body. And the reason why I was kind of asking this is I was looking back at kind of our past history where we've committed some CMAQ funds to a project. However, those funds were not programmed until, there was a decision by the CTC to award funds for that. So I just want to make sure that the sequence of events was not changing and that at the time of award by CTC, we would then be required to program the RSTP or CMAQ, et cetera.
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, as long as you have your board resolution that they've committed to the funds, and it doesn't, I don't know your sequence of events, but that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, and maybe this is nuanced, but and maybe it makes a difference. In the past, our executive director has provided a letter of commitment that the funding from, say, a CMAQ program would be available should this application be funded by the CTC. And at that point in time, we've kind of reserved some capacity in our funding that our board or governing body could then take action on, formally committing those funds and programming them in the FTIP. Which you could view it differently of a board's action to commit those funds versus the executive director's approval.
Yeah. So I think I see what you're saying. Like you wouldn't have your board approve it unless you're actually moving forward with the FTIP approval of program adoption. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
Yeah. So I think that is fine to have the letter of commitment at the time of application, and then should the project get programmed, then you would move forward and provide the board resolution and the FTIP adoption documentation.
Okay. Great. That helps me understand what's being proposed.
Yeah. Well, so this is,
Well,
I wasn't proposing anything different.
Sorry.
Like that. Yeah. So this
you
is
were clarifying my question to understand
Yeah.
whether anything was changing for the process.
Yeah, no, the process is staying the same. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. No, that's great. This is good clarification, I think, for everybody. Thank you.
Okay. Carl, go ahead.
Hey, Anya. Hey, Alika. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Hey, everyone. Carl Anderson at MTC. Going forward a slide to slide 30, just want to make a comment on the local partnership formulaic piece that's highlighted in green. So for this one, the current fiscal years for ATV Cycle 8 will be through fiscal year 31. But the next funding opportunity for LPP formulaic funds would be covering fiscal years 28 and 29. And so how would we manage a project that is identifying future LPP formulaic program funds from, say, fiscal year 30 or 31, but would be unable to program those funds until, 29? Yeah, that.
So what you're saying is that because of how the cycles fall for the different programs, because you would already have programmed all of your current LPP formula funds, you'd have to wait for the next cycle and you wouldn't be able to program it until like partway through the ATP cycle.
That is one example, but then another piece would be like, we know that there could be LPP formulaic funds program to fiscal year 30, but we can't program those funds since that's likely not to be in the next cycle of LPP. So it'd be like 2 cycles out, but it still overlaps with the fiscal years for ATP cycle 8.
So the LPP formula funds, whatever phase you have them on, would have to be allocated at the same time as the ATP funds for that phase. So if you're, yeah, I'll just say that. So you can't allocate LPP formula funds unless they've been programmed. And if you are proposing them for a phase that has ATP funds, I mean, so what you're saying, so really this is only if, like, for example, you put the LPP formula funds on construction in the last year of the ATP cycle, right?
So yeah, if a project sponsor identifies LPP formulaic funds, in fiscal year 30 to line up with their ATP request, the green box is saying that those funds must be programmed when the ATP cycle 8 programming is completed. But what I'm highlighting is that the agency would be unable to program the funds in that fiscal year because the next LPP formula cycle will not cover fiscal year 30. We'd have to wait 2 cycles.
Okay. So maybe just updating the language a little bit, that the LPP formula funds would have to be programmed, before allocation, and or something like that, right?
I think if we just say that local partnership formulaic funds are allowed as an uncommitted funding source, full stop, then we're okay. The green box here just feels a little too constricting on project sponsors that might be wanting to use that fund source in a later fiscal year that doesn't overlap with the current programming years.
Hey, Carl, this is Lori. Is this similar to the problem we had in the STIP with where we're getting off on our cycles?
Yeah, exactly. So because the STIP fiscal years don't align with the SB1 competitive fiscal years, the discussion during the STIP workshop was saying,
Okay.
hey, we can use future fiscal or future cycles of the SB1 program or the STIP program to count as uncommitted funds.
Yeah. So Anya, I think we worked through this issue on the STIP guidelines. We did figure this out, didn't we, Carl?
Yes.
So let's look at that, Anya.
Yeah. Okay. No,
Okay.
that sounds good. So thanks for bringing that, Carl. So I'll look at what Casey has in the STIP guidelines and just kind of maybe mirror the language to make sure that there's that flexibility for when the cycles don't line up.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anya.
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
Okay, so we received one additional comment from Greg stating, my understanding is the applicant should show uncommitted funds for a future ATP cycle for future project phases that are not part of the current request in the project programming request. Is that the correct understanding?
Yes. So the project programming request, or PPR, is one part of the application where you show the different fund sources. So you'll want to make sure that what you have in the PPR and the project programming request is consistent with the fund tables that you fill out in the actual application. But yes, that is where you would show that.
I'm not seeing any other questions or hands raised.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next slide then, which is still the same section. So if anyone thinks of any other questions on the previous slides, please let us know. So again, this is the same process or policies with just some streamlined edits and edits to have the text, the language, and the guidelines be consistent with how this section is phrased in other commission guidelines. So for those of you unfamiliar, if a project is proposed with uncommitted funds, all the funding commitments for that phase must be secured before July 1 of the fiscal year in which the project phase is programmed. And so some of the edits here is I added the word phase after project because I thought it was better applicable to the active transportation program, because unlike most of the SB1 programs who also have this same section, we fund every project phase. And then if there are uncommitted funds that are being proposed, the applicant has to provide a plan for securing the funding commitment and provide a contingency plan if that commitment should fall through. And then if for some reason some earlier pre-construction phases were allocated and completed with active transportation funds, but then later phases were with uncommitted funds, the agency is unable to get funding commitments, then so the project lapses or gets canceled, then at that point the agency would have to repay the other funds. And there are some further guidance on that in the project cancellation section. All right, I'll pause there before we go on to the next section.
I'll give it another few seconds here to see if anything else trickles in.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Carl, go ahead.
Thanks, Lika. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So I think just keeping this language would cover the intent of that green box on the last slide, because you would be saying, hey, LPP formula funds are allowed to be uncommitted. And then going to slide 31, these provisions would cover, making sure that the project sponsor actually programs those LPP formula funds to that project by the time they're ready to come in, for the allocation. So I think if we just keep this and then, delete that additional green box section, the intent is still covered there, but just my opinion.
Okay. No, I think that's a good suggestion, Carl. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, not seeing any other hands raised or questions. Jaden, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so this next section is focused on baseline agreements. So here you'll see that we just updated language, and then we ended up deleting certain parts that are actually included in the SB1 accountability and transparency guidelines, and those were revised in May of 2025. Shoot, I'm not sure why the embedded link isn't showing, but before we post these slides, I'll make sure that the link to the accountability and transparency guidelines are included here on this slide. But other than that, this section, has been updated, and it's just very minor. Do I have another slide, Jaden, on baseline agreements? I do. Oh, perfect. Okay. So this section here is primarily what was included in the guidelines, in the accountability and transparency guidelines, which is why you'll see this strike through on the left. And then on the right, here it just says commission may delete a project for which no baseline agreement is executed. The commission will not consider approval of a project allocation except for the environmental project phase and the non-infrastructure project phase for infrastructure or non-infrastructure combination projects without an approved baseline agreement. And then again, it references the SB1 accountability and transparency guidelines. So that will be included as one of the resources. But again, just wanted to flag this for you all. I'll take a pause to see if there are any questions on the baseline agreements. Okay, I think we can jump to the next slide.
Okay, so this section, if you look at our little chart on the top of the slide here, you'll see that in the current guidelines, the 2025 guidelines, this section was actually called the project applicant section, and this was included in the roles and responsibilities section. So you may remember in a past workshop for the 2027 guidelines, we proposed and stakeholders agreed to delete that section and incorporate the language that was not already included in other parts of the guidelines in the parts of the guidelines where it was relevant. So the reason that this section wasn't part of that roles and responsibilities is because it kind of combined the roles and responsibilities of the project applicant with the standard policy for signage that is included in all of the commission guidelines. So what we've done here is just rename the section to be only project signage. And then on the right, you'll see the text that was updated to be consistent with what's included in other guidelines for the project signage sections. And then the text that's deleted are the kind of roles and responsibilities guidance that had been included under this section, and the parts that were not already in other parts of the guidelines were moved. And I think we probably covered most of that added language in some of the previous workshops. Any questions on this? So this is, again, not new, just updating to the most current language.
Not seeing any questions or hands raised.
Let's move on to the next section. So this is the last section that we had planned to talk about today. And this is the scoring criteria section. For those of you familiar with the guidelines, you'll remember that there's a chart which has the scoring topics and the number of points assigned to each of the topics. you'll see under our little updates bullet points there, we're not proposing any changes for the chart or the scoring topics. And so we've not included the chart in the PowerPoint because we're not proposing updates. It will stay the same. We'll go through each of the scoring topics or scoring criteria that is included in the guidelines. And we kind of put these slides together a little differently. There's a lot of text edits. Really what we wanted to do when we were looking at this is give kind of a high-level summary of what the scoring rubric includes for that scoring criteria, and a little bit of high-level information about how the score for that specific criteria is broken down. So on the left hand of this, the next few slides, you'll see all the strikeout and new text, and then on the right side you'll see it without any track changes. Okay, so we have a question on this slide. Greg asks, why was "and ranked" deleted? So the way that we fund or put together the staff recommendations is based on the score. So the highest score on down until we run out of funds, basically. So we really just go off of the score for the application. They're not like ranked differently. They're just scored, and that is the rank. I thought it was redundant language. If you thought it's confusing to delete it, maybe you can raise your hand. I'm happy to hear your thoughts. Oh, okay. So Greg commented, I was going to guess it was redundant. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's go to the next slide. And I'm gonna let Alika start us off.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anya. So as Anya kind of talked through already, these next slides will focus on the application questions. You'll see that we've simplified some of the language and removed some of the text that's repetitive to what's included in the application scoring rubric. So these, in this iteration of the guidelines, these will be just high level of like what is expected to be addressed. And then you'll see more details and more specifics on the questions and sub-questions outlined in the scoring rubrics that we provide around the time the call for projects goes out. So I'll start off with the disadvantaged communities question. On the left, you'll see the track changes, and looking at the right, without the track changes, the benefit to disadvantaged communities. This is question 1 in the applications. The applicant will be asked to demonstrate the benefits provided to the disadvantaged community impacted by this project. The score is divided into 3 subsections that are scored. The first is the direct benefit, and this is the narrative portion of this question. And then there are 2 subsections that are also scored. These are done by commission staff. One is determining your project location, if it fully falls within a disadvantaged community, partially or not at all, as well as the severity. And the severity is calculated based on the disadvantaged community qualifier that is selected. And based on that and the census tracts that your project falls within, You will input that data. Commission staff will go in and verify that all of that information, and each of the disadvantaged community qualifiers are tiered to give you a maximum of 4 points for severity. And so all of that is outlined again in the scoring rubrics, but these are the main 3 sections that are scored under the disadvantaged communities question. So this criterion also considers the applicant's anti-displacement policies and actions that are being implemented to discourage gentrification within that community. Okay, I'll take a pause here to see if there are any questions. Okay, not seeing anything. Jaden, can we go to the next slide, please?
Alika, if I can just
Sure.
jump in for a second. So I want to also point out, because you're only seeing like this very small portion of the guidelines. So the section before the scoring criteria in the guidelines, like actually talks about our project selection process. And there is a paragraph in there about our scoring rubric, which includes the sentence that basically encourages applicants to refer to the scoring rubric as they're filling out their application. And so, like, again, this is these little like paragraphs are meant to just be like a high level summary of what's in the scoring rubric. And we really hope that applicants really look at the scoring rubric to get the detail, like what Alika was talking about for the last scoring criteria. All of that detail she's getting from the scoring rubric. So yeah, just wanted to repeat that one more time.
Thanks, Anya. Okay, so the next scoring criteria is the need. Again, you'll see on the left, we have the track changes showing, and on the right, it is without the track changes. So again, maintaining the high level overview for this question, the applicant is asked to demonstrate the need for the project and the project's potential to increase walking and bicycling, especially among students. The score considers need in the context of connectivity to key destinations, including connections to transit, mobility to access everyday needs and services, as well as local public health concerns. And this score is impacted by the applicant's ability to demonstrate the active transportation needs of students. So again, this question is looking at it at a high level, but in the scoring rubric, you'll see this kind of broken out into 2 parts that are scored under the need question. One will be focused on the needs of your community. Again, tying that to connectivity to key destinations and talking about access to transit, you know, talking about mobility, and most importantly, the local health concerns. And so as you're kind of talking through that and incorporating everything that you've discussed with your community members through your engagement process, when you go to the second half of the need question, it's really asking you to tie your proposed improvements to all of the needs that you've outlined under Part A. And then as mentioned on this slide, the score is impacted by the applicant's ability to demonstrate the active transportation needs of students. This does not mean that you can only receive points if your project is a Safe Routes to School project. When we talk about students, it's really any type of student, whether that's K through 12 students, whether it's college, you know, trade school, university, whatever type of student that your community will be utilizing this project, you can really talk about them under this question to receive the 2 points under Part A and 1 point under Part B of the need question. Okay, I'll take few seconds to see if anything trickles in the chat. Okay, Jaden, could you please jump to the next slide? Thank you. So the next question that we want, okay, so it seems we have a question from Greg. To be clear, receiving full points doesn't require addressing the needs of students. So to receive full points under this question, you do need to talk about the active transportation needs of students. So again, under the need question, it's broken out into two parts. Part A, you can receive 2 points when you talk about the needs of students, and part B, you receive 1 point. So in total, 3 points. We have had instances where, you know, there may be a project that isn't close to a school, or you know, the community doesn't have very many students. I recommend working with your community through your engagement process. If there are any kids or young adults in your neighborhood, maybe do surveys with them, see how they are getting to schools or any sort of universities, and that language can be included. Again, it's not limited to K through 12 students. So yeah, Greg, if you have any thoughts on that, just let me know. Okay, so moving on to the safety question. Again, you'll see here, we're clarifying text edits and providing some simplified language here. So for the safety question, here we're asking the applicants to address the projects for potential to reduce pedestrian and bicycle fatalities, injuries, crashes. The scores will consider the identified safety hazards for pedestrians and bicyclists, as well as the history of pedestrian and bicycle collisions and the selected countermeasures. The applicants must demonstrate that the project location is a priority and that the project will remedy the identified safety hazards. So as with all the questions, we highly recommend all of our applicants to utilize the scoring rubrics. With the safety question in particular, there's a lot more detail provided as to the types of information, supporting documentation, analysis that should be included as part of your narrative, response, and attachments. So I highly recommend looking at that. And then let's see, there is some language that you'll see on the track changes side that's bold, but it's in strikeout. I just want to make it clear. So let me read the language first. It says, if the project includes bicycle improvements, applicants must also discuss the considerations made when evaluating and selecting the project's bikeway facility type. So this language will be included in the scoring rubrics. And for those who are unfamiliar, because we have mentioned the scoring rubrics several times, these rubrics outline question by question exactly what the evaluators are looking at in your narrative and attachments within your application, and they're using the scoring rubrics to score your application. So the reason why we provide these around the time that the call for projects is out is because we want our applicants to be able to utilize that as a tool to ensure that they're responding to every part of every question. If they're facing any challenges, which we see very often with a safety question where they may have lacking collision data, or they have collision hotspots that fall outside of the proposed project, things of that sort, we provide a lot of guidance to help ensure that you are still addressing the question so that you can receive the maximum points here. Take another pause before moving on to the next question. Okay, next slide, please, Jaden. Okay, So the next question we wanted to go over is public participation and planning. Here you'll see that applicants are required to clearly describe the project-specific outreach and engagement activities conducted. We're also asking to provide evidence of that engagement that was conducted and to describe the community feedback received throughout the entire process. So projects utilizing the large project application type will receive a higher score if their project is specifically listed in an adopted bicycle transportation plan or similar plan, such as like a safe routes to school, pedestrian, or an active transportation plan. And I believe it's 1 or 2 points. But that is only specific to the large application. Again, please look at the scoring rubrics. They will provide very helpful guidance on what our expectations are in terms of the attachment fields and what we would like to see in the narrative responses. In general, very high level, we prefer seeing engagement conducted with communities versus outreach. So actually collaborating with your community members and important stakeholders that should be involved throughout your process versus you letting them know this is the project that we are submitting. So I'll take another pause here before we move on. Okay, so it looks like we can move on to the next question. I think you accidentally went back one, Jaden. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so the next questions we'll be looking at are the scope and plan layout consistency and cost effectiveness, as well as the scope and plan layout consistency. So these are kind of the same question. You'll see for part E, this is specific to the large project application because it also includes the discussion of cost effectiveness. Whereas for the small and medium project applications, as well as the non-infrastructure only application, the question is specific to scope and plan layout consistency. So I'll start with section F, since this kind of covers part of section E as well. This score is based on consistency between the maps, the engineer's estimate, and the project scope. There are other related elements, that we really look at, and that includes your schedule and just making sure that it's clear, it makes sense with what you are requesting and the types of improvements that you are proposing. And I will add to this, we have our colleagues at Caltrans headquarters helping us with this part of the question. As some of you may know, we are not engineers, so it's really helpful having their insight, and they provide all of the feedback on the scope and plan layout consistency question. So jumping back to part E, this also includes the discussion of cost effectiveness. So here, the large applications are asked to provide a narrative response on how they selected the best recognized solutions for their proposed improvements. And so the scoring rubric will outline more specifically the items that should be discussed under this part of the question. Pause here. Okay. Next question, or next slide, please. Okay. This next one here is section G, implementation and plan development. So this is specific to the plan application. The score is based on evidence that the plan will lead to the implementation of the identified projects. And the scope for delivering the plan is clear, complete, and organized. And then, excuse me, you'll see that there's some added language here. This was actually moved from the application type section. So this is not new information. This is basically just moved to this section here now. So You'll see under first priority eligible applicants that do not have any eligible plans. Our second priority goes to eligible applicants that have at least one bicycle, pedestrian, or safe routes to school plan, but not all of the ones that are listed. Our third priority for funding plans is eligible applicants that wish to update an eligible plan that is more than 5 years old. And our lowest priority goes to eligible applicants that wish to update an eligible plan that is 5 years old or less. Again, this language is not new. It's just been moved in the guidelines. Not seeing anything from the group, so we can continue on. And Anya, feel free to jump in if you want to take over. I know everyone's probably tired of listening to me talk, but moving on to context-sensitive bikeways, walkways, and innovative project elements. So again, this language has just been clarified and simplified. So specific to the large and medium project applications, this score is based on the recognized best solutions appropriate for the local community context. The applicant should discuss how the project advances a lower stress environment or lower stress network. For infrastructure projects, proposing a non-infrastructure element, so combination projects, the score considers how effectiveness of the program will be measured and how the program will be sustained after completion. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, transformative projects. So again, clarifying and simplifying the language here. Specific to the large application only, this score is based on the transformative nature of the project in the context of other projects in the area and local policies or laws that encourage walking and biking and other forms of mode shift. So this score is based on if the project is part of a larger walking and biking network, as well as the local jurisdiction's goals and plans and planning objectives for reducing pedestrian and bicycle fatalities and injuries. Part of the score is also based on the potential for the project to support existing and planned housing, especially affordable housing. So again, the scoring rubric will provide more guidance on this. But in regards to the transformative projects, we do realize that transformative can mean something different in every community. So as long as you are able to address as to how your project is considered transformative within your region or your community, that is totally acceptable as part of your response. And we recognize that some of the other commission programs also address affordable housing. Some of them discuss, and we included this, I believe, in the Cycle 6 guidelines. We included the pro-housing designation program. Not all of the active transportation program applicants can apply for that pro-housing designation, which is why we are asking for applicants to discuss for their project to support existing and planned housing instead. I'll pause to see if there are any other questions or comments here. Okay, looks like we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so next we're looking at two separate questions, evaluation and sustainability, as well as leveraging. So the evaluation and sustainability is specific to the non-infrastructure only project application. And this question is asking the applicants to outline the applicant's plan to measure the effectiveness of the program, as well as the plan to sustain the program beyond the ATP funding. So the score will consider whether the proposed tools and methods for evaluation are realistic and sustainable. and if the program adds lasting value to the community. And the leveraging question, this is included and specific to the large and medium project applications. Points are awarded based on the amount of committed non-ATP funds. The applications submitted by tribal governments, and these are federally recognized tribes and projects that are on tribal lands, they will be awarded the maximum points under leveraging. And you can receive up to 5 points in this question. And within the scoring rubric and within the application itself, there is a tier that is provided. And to receive the maximum amount of points, you need to include more than 20% of your total project cost as committed non-ATP funds. Take a pause here. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this next section is focused on the California Conservation Corps. And so this is just clarifying text edits. You'll see it's very minor. So just adding specific to all application types except the plan application. Applicants must seek the California Conservation Corps or a certified local community conservation corps' participation. Please make sure to look at the scoring rubric when it comes to this part of the application. There is guidance that is provided in the application itself as well, but we have seen instances in past cycles where if a project is being resubmitted, they will not update that California Conservation Corps correspondence. That'll kind of be carried over from the previous cycle, and that's not something that we allow in the program. So please make sure that every cycle that you are submitting an application, you are updating that correspondence, either again with the California Conservation Corps or a certified local community conservation corps.
I'll just add to Alika's point that what she just said is covered in the bullet point A. And in the 2025 guidelines, that is actually bullet point F. So we moved it to the top to make it the number one thing you see under this section. So yeah. While there's no text changes, it's the exact same language. We did move that to the front so that it's not missed.
Thanks, Anya. Okay, not seeing any questions come in. I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, past performance. This part of the scoring criteria is applicable to all of the application types. So an applicant's performance on past ATP projects, points may be reduced for poor past performance on an active transportation program project. Poor past performance includes, but is not limited to non-use of the core as committed in a past ATP award or adverse audit findings in a past ATP project. And I don't think that we've ever actually utilized this field, but this is here. So please make note of it. It is also included in the scoring rubric, I believe, or maybe it's just in the application and I'm confusing it. But this is also part of the scoring criteria for the active transportation program. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Anya?
So I was just going to say that this is something that is not evaluated by our evaluation teams. This is something that commission staff looks at, and you want to get 0 points on this because the the scale is 0 to -5. So,
Oh yeah, that's a
and,
good
and
point.
yeah, same with the core.
Mhm.
Like, yes. So that was it. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thanks, Anya. That's a good point. Yes. So for past performance and for the California Conservation Corps questions, those ideally you would like to receive 0 points. Otherwise, you will be reduced points of up to 5. And it looks like we have a question from Louis Zhao asking, for past performance, what is the time frame you are evaluating this criteria? That's a good question. I don't know, Anya, if you have any insight on that.
Well, so I think it would just be, it would apply to any active transportation project. So let's say if you have a project in cycle 1 or cycle 2 that has no adverse finding, like audit findings, you said you would use the core and you did, then, then those are fine. I think, and I think at this point we probably have moved past that and looked at those, the performance of those projects in, the most recent previous past cycles, cycle 6, cycle 7. So I think as projects are getting completed and past cycles is when, some of these things might come out. So I hate to say there's like a specific time frame. It really just depends on when projects are getting completed.
Thanks, Anya. Not seeing any other questions or hands raised.
And I want to clarify too, because this is a question that we get a lot as we talk to agencies about issues. So if for some reason a project has to be canceled, or you for whatever reason need to lapse the funds that are programmed on a particular phase, those are not things that are looked at for this criteria. We understand, and we have a process in our guidelines that allows you to cancel a project and to go through that process with us. So those types of things would not be included here. This is meant to cover things, for example, if a project was audited and the audit findings came up with, well, the ATP funded this scope and they didn't do that. They completed a completely different scope and didn't return the money. Like, it's that type of thing, which is really kind of extreme, and which is why we haven't really utilized this, because honestly, all of our funded projects have been doing really well, in terms of the delivery and communicating with us on scope changes. So, if your project needs a scope change, that doesn't reflect badly on this review criteria. So I want to clarify that, because this is really meant to cover those extreme instances where there was zero communication with commission or Caltrans staff, and it kind of came out as a surprise in a way. So I hope that helps.
Okay, thanks, Anya. Not seeing anything come in. I think we can move on to the next slide. Perfect.
All right, thank you, Alika. All right, so on this slide, I will be providing a recap of some of the action items we have ongoing. So let me start with that. So on our current ongoing action item list, we have a few items. 1, CTC to incorporate Cycle 7 evaluator feedback on submittable. 2, CTC to consider alternative to the disadvantaged community qualifier to replace the US DOT Equitable Transportation Community Explorer. 3, CTC to determine if ATP can be state-only funded. And then 5, CTC staff will work with Caltrans to inquire about the master agreement process and analyze the efficiency of the process. We also have some future workshop discussion items listed, such as guidance on the use of AI in applications, considering doubling the total points for all applications, considering a two-step application process, and considering adding the transformative question to the small and medium infrastructure and non-infrastructure applications. And lastly, a future workshop discussion around the letters of support in the applications. That's what we currently have ongoing. From our meeting today, I believe I heard one action item, and that was based around the conversation between Anya and Carl, discussing potentially aligning section 26, which is the committed and uncommitted fund section, with the STIP guidelines to make sure we're aligned in that regard. I'll pause here to see Alika or Anya, was there any additional action items that I may not have captured from today's meeting? Okay, hearing none. Allie, saw you come off camera. Any action items on your end?
Yeah, I would love if we could add the survey as an action item that for the non-infrastructure guidance. And then also just pointing people to a link to where that guidance currently lives on the page, if that's okay.
Got it. Thank you. Noted. Okay, thank you so much, Allie. We'll add that as well. Okay, and then going on to the next slide. So next steps. So our next workshop is a hybrid central workshop, which will take place in Merced on October 16th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. This will be concurrent with the CTC meeting. So later that day, we'll have our CTC meeting, but this is in the morning. So definitely come if you can. If not, you can register virtually. Again, the difference is this workshop will be held via Teams, not Zoom. So definitely look for that registration link in this presentation, as well as on our website once we get that updated. I did also want to mention that another workshop, which will be hybrid, will be our PSR equivalency workshop, which will be held December 4th, again, concurrent with our CTC meeting. That will take place in Riverside, California. And again, we'll be discussing the PSR equivalency in that workshop. We'll have some Caltrans staff on the line to assist with any questions you might have as stakeholders. And then the last update I wanted to provide, if you look at our ATP calendar on our website, we had a workshop scheduled for the 28th of October. That workshop will no longer be held. So we have our next one on the 16th, and we have one in November. I believe it's November 19th, if I remember correctly. But the October 28th workshop will no longer be held. That was an additional workshop that was intended to discuss guidelines, but we don't think we'll need that additional workshop to finish the rest of our conversation pertaining the guidelines. And next slide here, you will see our contact information, Anya, Alika, and myself. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to get back to you. And we can discuss any items you have via email or set up a meeting to discuss whatever you would like to bring up. With that being said, I'll turn it back over to Anya to see if you have any closing remarks or anything before we close today's workshop.
Before I hand things over to Anya, we actually got a comment, and this actually raises a really good point that I just wanted to touch on. So the comment states, in regards to the public participation and planning question in the application, this person is wondering if anyone is concerned that we might be calling people into public spaces for ATP engagement purposes, and inadvertently making those meetings, which, you know, we're attracting non-English speakers, they may inadvertently become targets for ICE. And so I think this is a really great point, and I appreciate this person raising this point. I would like to say, in regards to our engagement and public participation in planning, specifically since COVID, we have always been open to accepting any types of engagement, and that includes virtual. So if you feel that your community members will not be as encouraged to participate, or you yourself as an agency are worried about putting your community members in that position where they might be at risk, I think that is totally acceptable to state in your narrative response. Just make sure that you're actually talking about it. And if you look back to cycle 6, we added a prompt specific to COVID that asked you to talk about the challenges that you were facing throughout your engagement process. And so that's kind of remained in the application, even though we're not specifically talking about COVID anymore. And so I think with this point that's being raised, I think this would be a totally valid challenge to call out in your narrative, as long as you're able to show that you are doing something with your community to get their input and feedback. I think that's really the core of what we're looking for. So whether that's holding online workshops, holding online surveys, or doing mailers instead, as long as you're able to showcase that you're trying to work with them and you're taking their feedback into consideration, I think it's absolutely valid to hold things in a virtual setting. And I really appreciate for this person bringing it up.
Yeah, thank you. So with that, as Jaden noted, we have come to the end of the topics that we had prepared to cover with you in this workshop today. We do still have time left on this meeting invitation, so we're happy to stay on, and if you have any questions or want to talk about different items in the ATP guidelines or just on the ATP, we're happy to stay on. Allie and Emma are also still on, so if you have any non-infrastructure application questions or questions on the guidance or ideas, we are happy to stay and do that with you. But for what we've prepared to talk about today, thank you all for your participation. Thank you for all of your comments and your feedback. It's really great to hear from you and to kind of hear your thoughts on what we are thinking about. So yeah, that's it for us. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and I hope to see all of you, most of you, either in person or virtually at our next workshop. Thank you.
Looks like we have one hand up from Judy Weber. Judy, you're unmuted and free to make your comment.
Hi there, thanks. Alika, this is to you. I'm curious. From my recollection, and I definitely could be wrong, I feel like the draft fund estimate has been released earlier than January in past cycles. Is that correct, or am I just thinking incorrectly? It seems late to me.
Yeah, so it's usually done alongside the draft guidelines. So you will see them in January.
Okay.
At the January commission meeting.
Than other cycles? Because why I'm asking this is because last cycle you know, we had, I guess it was augmented, or we had some issues with money, I guess, being taken away or reduced, the fund.
Mhm.
And I thought
Mhm.
we knew by September what our draft estimate was. So that's why I'm asking that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Judy. So I think what you're speaking to specifically, we had already seen the original draft estimate for cycle 7, and then we adopted the guidelines as well as the final fund estimate at the March commission meeting, and I believe that was 2024. And then that following September, you saw a revised fund estimate that was outlining the cuts to the program. So with this upcoming cycle, we're kind of back on track with our regular schedule. So we'll see the draft in January and then the final version in March.
Okay, okay, that makes sense.
Mhm.
You know,
No problem.
Yeah, and the draft will come forward in January, and then we will adopt the final fund estimate and the final guidelines at the March commission meeting. And then that following, which is when the call for projects opens, and then that following June is when the deadline for applications will be.
okay, thanks much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Judy.
So we had a question in the chat from
Yeah.
Georgina.
Yep.
So the ATP, you can apply for any project phase from environmental design, right-of-way, and construction. And then there's also, yes, so those are the project phases. If you want to apply for only the design phase, it has to be a project that fits under the large infrastructure application type. So there's like a dollar amount. I don't know if you want to come off mute if you have follow-up questions. Okay.
Okay, I see there's about 14 attendees left in the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or type your comments in the chat and we can address those. All right, to our last 9 attendees, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to raise your hand or provide a comment. If not, we'll see you at the next workshop. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, I think we'll close up our workshop, and feel free to contact any of us with questions offline. And thank you again for coming.